Hello, welcome to PaynePoints of Interest with Sarah Harbuck. My co-host today is the lovely Kristen Ellis.
Good morning.
We want to tell the stories of people and their businesses and the journey that they are on. Our purpose here at PaynePoints is to gather a new perspective on starting, growing, maturing, and maintaining businesses of all sizes. So grab that cup of coffee and sit back as we start this discussion. All right, guys, welcome. Today we have a special guest, Bob Harbuck, and he is with Rural Wastewater Systems. Hello, Bob.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
You'll probably notice that the last name is the same as mine. This is my father-in-law. He has done, well, he's had a whole gamut of careers in his life. I can let him get into all that with you. But the business RWS has been up and running since 1994?
3 or 4, yes.
Yeah, 93 or 4. I couldn't remember. I was sitting there racking my brain the other day, like, okay, I know he started in the mid-90s or early 90s. I can't remember exactly when. But why don't you give us a little brief history of your work experience and how you came to be in this business?
Well, I've often teased people that if they looked at my resume, they would think I couldn't hold down a job because I have done many things during my life, and maybe we can get into this later, but it has to do with my personality.
Yeah.
And but I'm 67 years old, married to my college sweetheart, Mary Ann, for 46 years.
Oh, wow.
We have 8 children, 7 boys and 1 girl, 12 grandchildren, 5 super daughter-in-laws, which I won't mention their names.
But I'm his favorite.
So I was born here in Lufkin, but I didn't go to high school here. We lived down, both sets of grandparents live here, but we were down in southeast Texas. And so I came up to SFA to study forestry. Got a BS in forestry, and that's where I met my wife. So that's a little about me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know all that. But I think it's interesting that you got a degree in forestry, and yet every career path has taken you, with the exception of Rural Wastewater Systems, where it's kind of in the same vein, have taken you in completely different directions. And I'm sure gained a lot of life experience doing all of those things, and has helped you in every job you've been in. I imagine it's not really the culture anymore to stay in a job for 40 or 50 years.
No,
you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know anybody who's stayed in the same career for a terribly long
Maybe
period
the
of time.
same vein, like the same
Type of thing.
general, yeah,
but
not
not
the same position, yeah.
So you started Rural Wastewater Systems, which is give the listeners a brief rundown of what that is.
What exactly do you do?
Well, it's a design company. A few years ago, the state of Texas got serious about regulating wastewater. I think they got so many complaints of sewage and wastewater. And this is in rural areas, not in cities.
Right.
Individual houses and businesses that are out there, which is the majority, really.
Here in Texas especially.
Yeah. So when they got seriously regulating that, they passed some laws that required a person to go out and evaluate someone's property, then draw a design of what the wastewater system would look like, and then present it to a regulator, then installers. So they started a whole series of things of educating people about how to do this. And it's like a lot of things with the government. It starts out good. It's a great idea.
Yeah, always with the best intentions.
Yeah, always with the best intentions.
Yeah.
And then, 10, 15, 20 years later, then it may not be the same thing. But anyway, it's a design. My part is not the installation or the regulation. It's the design work.
Making sure everything that there's enough land to do all the different things that will be needed to install the septic system, whichever type they end up picking. You worked for the health department though before you did rural wastewater systems. Was that the lead in to you having this career in this particular field, or had this been something you had been thinking of because of the changing regulations? Like what brought you here?
Yeah, let's go back to the forestry. I love studying forestry, and forestry is a wonderful career. But when I graduated, it was difficult to get a job. And also I had spent several summers in the southern forest working, which, it's very hot,
Yes.
and I said, I don't know if I want to do this. But, forestry, although I enjoy it. So that's one of the reasons I didn't pursue a career in forestry. So then I went through several jobs, ending up in public health, environmental health. Okay, and so prior to me starting a business, I had worked for 3 or 4 large companies, a metropolitan police. I was a policeman in a metropolitan area here in Texas. I worked for GMAC for several years as a field rep.
I forgot about that.
I worked at FedEx for a while at the hub in Memphis, Tennessee. And so then I spent nearly 9 years in public health here locally. So I had accumulated a lot of experience working for someone else.
Yeah.
And so there's always that dream and almost romantic idea that, if I just worked for myself, everything would be wonderful.
Yeah, it's part of the American dream. Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
wants
Be
to
your own boss.
do your own thing,
Yeah.
right?
But we know, I'm sure that you bring out in this program that it's a lot more complicated than that.
There's a lot more to it once you get down once you
Yeah.
get started with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there I was sitting in public health when these regulations came about, and a whole different industry was being created. And so I began to wonder, could I make the jump from this secure, if you want to put it, job with pretty good insurance, but I wasn't making much money, under $30,000 a year, and I had at that time 7 children. So I had all the reasons.
Of course, this was 25 years ago. Things were a little
A
different.
little bit different.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Still
my
hard.
My father also went to SFA and got a forestry degree, and he did not stay in forestry because he started a family and did not think he could support his family on the salary that he was on.
Yeah.
So similar story
Y'all's
there.
fields are actually very similar in that you do.
I do stormwater pollution prevention
Okay.
for construction mostly.
So y'all are kind of in the same little
kinda
vein over there.
Similar anyway, yeah.
So when you were just mentioning how you were making this steady salary, but it wasn't a ton. You had 7 children, so taking that leap off the cliff to start a business with so many responsibilities at home had to have been a little nerve-wracking. Was it?
Yeah, and that's what's, I think, up to date to today. There are people listening to our voices now, I think, that are in a good, solid job, but it's not making enough. They're having to deal with the institution that they're in,
Bureaucracy.
and they wonder,
involved.
if they can jump out and do something different. So it's scary. It's risk assessment, and so I began to gather information to help me assess the risk of doing that. And I went around to all the counties around where I already knew, since I was in public health, I already knew the regulators in those counties and talked to them about what it would be like and how much people were charging, and they gave me sample copies of what other people were doing coming in from other
nice, yeah.
areas. So I began to kind of do everything I could to figure out how to do that. And even then, it was I probably would not have done it. The only reason I did do it is because my work environment changed.
So it sort of forced the issue.
It forced the issue. The management changed. I was not in their favor anymore, if you want to put it that way. And so work began to be difficult. And so, in other words, that was the final draw that helped
Yeah.
boot me out and say, well, I'm just going to take the leap and
Do it.
start my own
Right.
business.
It does sound like you did a little bit of research and planning and kind of strategizing before you left your quote corporate job. I imagine when you have a large family, that's a main concern is, am I going to be able to continue to support them at least this same level, hopefully at a higher level, but at least to
Right,
maintain the
right.
status quo, which I know is a lot of, I mean, everybody we've talked to, that's kind of been the
It's
issue.
always a
leaving
big part
a-
of the motivating factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, leaving
leaving
yeah.
a corporate job to go start your own thing and making sure that you can still support your
Yeah.
family, because
It's a
we
scary
had
thing.
a guy in here a couple weeks ago, and he has small children, and he had a regular corporate job, and then he decided to start a videography business, and the leaps and bounds that kind of have to come along with that. So I always think it's interesting I think there's a similar personality type that's just so willing to
Yeah.
do that, and even though you line all those people up and there's almost nothing similar about them,
Yeah.
there's some sort of there's a little
There's
spark of something.
Yeah, there's something that ties it all together.
that makes them go, you know what, I'm just going to jump off this cliff and I'll build the parachute on the way down.
It sounds like you did a pretty good job of planning and strategizing and figuring out.
And
you know,
networking in the old days.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of had a foot in the door getting started, with your experience.
Well, I did start to develop some resources like that, and I had some friends that were supporting me in making that jump, and I did a little bit of a business plan. I
Mhm.
remember that, and I had to assess, the cost value, how much
Mhm.
equipment and things that I would need to purchase even to
Right.
get started. Okay, could I start part-time, on the weekends and in the evenings?
Right. Keep your
Regular
job
job,
for a little
yeah.
while. Right.
And I think I did that a little bit, but things, rushed me out the door pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where I think personality comes in. I don't know if you've done personality tests. There's a myriad of them.
Mm.
I've in recent years studied the Enneagram, and I'm a number 2 on the Enneagram, a helper. And as I look back over my career, that really is insightful. I didn't know it at the time.
Makes a lot of sense though
See,
now.
I was highly motivated to help people,
Yeah.
and so I always assess a job and a task like, well, not only does it benefit me, but it also has to benefit the other person,
Right.
so that, and what's interesting is I'm older now and there's new people coming into my industry, and I've been able to help some of them get started, kind of pass it on to kind of a thing. I've noticed some people have a personality that, how can I say it? They probably should not be running their own business.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
just don't have they're warriors. They're
Yeah.
people that just obsess about everything. So I don't know. Some people seem to function well under leadership and
Yes.
in regular jobs. And then other personalities seem to bloom better when they're on their own. Have y'all found that to be true?
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, my father would be the first one to admit when he tried to start his own business, he was like, I just don't have the personality for something like this. I'm
Right.
better at working for someone else.
Right.
And he learned that, a couple years into his own business, and then decided to move on and do something else, because he was like, this is just not for me. And, I definitely could see that about several people that I have had, worked with over the years. And I'm sure you guys have had that same experience that, certain people, they're better working either in conjunction with someone else. They should
Right.
partner up with someone, or maybe just keep that.
Some people need that
that
motivation,
regular.
that constant, they need that leadership. They're not
Some people thrive in chaos, and but business ownership can be chaos.
very much so.
So, when you thrive in that kind of environment, this is going to be a good thing for you. If you're someone who likes structure and order, it's
It's
a little
difficult to
harder.
create that when you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, because everything is just, all.
Well, I was able to look back, like I said earlier, at all these jobs that I had, which I stayed in around 5 years, okay, until my public health career, which I stayed 9 years in because I had a lot of small children right then, and I really could not afford to jump. So when I studied my personality, I realized that why that was happening
Yeah.
after the fact. And so here's the reason. On the Enneagram, when you're a helper, number 2, there's a kind of an unconscious contract that you make with the people you're working for. In other words, you say unconsciously to yourself, okay, I'm fixing to give 150% on this job, but at some point I need some payback. I need some,
Right.
And so there's this unconscious contract that you make. And guess what happens when that payback does not come?
You're ready to move on.
You quit. You say, look, these guys are not appreciating me. I'm out of here. Now, if I would have known that earlier, and that's why I would recommend to anybody that's going into business that you need to understand your personality and the personality of others.
100%.
Yeah.
Wow, that could really help you. I would
That's
probably
great. That's
have
great advice. Yeah.
kept in the police work or some of the earlier jobs I've got, because I would have understood that what I'm looking for can't really come from the outside. It has to come from the inside. It has to be more of a spiritual thing or a heart thing in the end for my personality.
And it took you several decades to figure that out about yourself. And
Yeah.
I think even my father said, here I am. He was in his 50s when he started that business, and it was like, this is not a good fit for me. And he realized it as he did it. So I feel like if you can get that slight preamble, preface to
Gain that insight
beforehand, you might save yourself some heartache. But sometimes you have to live the journey in order to know.
Right. Some people have, and that's goes back to different personality types. Some people have to learn the hard way. They have to,
I got to make the mistakes.
Right. You can tell
then I
them
go, "Oh."
over and over, no, this isn't going to work for you. You got to do this, but they can't. They're not going to see it until they've been through it themselves.
So do you think, one of our questions here is what aspect of your business has taught you the most when it comes to being in business for yourself and all these things, looking back, at your personality type and what have you, do you think it's taught you these specific traits about yourself or is there something else that being in business for yourself has taught you?
Yeah, in my particular business, there's, 3 or 4 people involved. There's the owner, there's the designer and site evaluator, which is me, and then there's the installer, and then there's the regulator. And so there's all these different personalities, if you want to put it that way. And so, and really, in a lot of ways, the only one you have control over is yourself.
Right.
How you respond to things, and so it has helped me to stay out of some trouble in learning about my personality. I wish I'd have done that a lot earlier. I think it would have helped. But we all are looking for that perfect fit for us. That we can both use our gifts, and that's another thing, gifts and talents. I know those are related to personality, but some people are very gifted at having a vision, getting a business started, but they're not gifted at the everyday nuts and bolts of running a business.
Right.
So that's another thing you learn. Like, if it hadn't been for Mary Ann, who's very detailed, my wife, who's a very detailed person in doing the finances and keeping records and everything. I would have been a disaster. I'm a very good people person, personality-wise, and also in doing the police work and the other type of work I did, I developed, how to talk to people, different lifestyles.
You have a level of patience within you that I could never possess. Just listen, like having watched you deal with certain situations and listening to you, and it's just like he's just being so gracious right now, and I'd be screaming.
Well, I have my days.
Sure, but like overall, you've got a much more of a let's sit down and fix this issue,
let's look at this and see what we can do to resolve it.
Right, which is a good personality trait to have, especially when you are dealing with 3 other entities in your work on a daily daily basis. So
dealing with regulatory agencies is not always.
That can be a real test of patience.
Not always fun, right? Yeah, but it sounds that's something that we've come across a lot with so many different, all the different interviews and the different people and different businesses and different personalities. One of the main things that we come across a lot is, know your strengths and put people in the right place, to handle your weaknesses. So for you, it was your wife handling the finances, and for some other people, they may be great with the finances and the books, but need someone to handle more of the creative
Or the people.
right, the people side of things. So that's just a good general all around piece of advice I think that we've come across is know yourself, know your strengths, play to those strengths, and find the right people to fill those other roles, so you're not spreading yourself
so thin that you break.
Right.
Definitely. And getting Marianne to do your books, I mean, having known you guys for a long time and knowing how she likes those little tedious things. She's a puzzle putter together.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is, what the technical term for that is, but she likes to put puzzles together, and dealing with accounting can be kind of like that.
Very much so.
You have been in business for over 25 years. And so you have had a long time to see the ebb and flow of, success and failure. What would you say have been some of your biggest struggles or obstacles in the last 2.5 decades when it comes to running your business? The different, the housing crash of 2008 had a big effect. I know that personally. Different things like that. The regulatory agencies changing their policies and the continuing education you constantly have to keep up with. Have those all added to kind of the hurdles you've had to jump over? Is there something else that you would pinpoint?
Well, to be current, this whole thing that we're in now with the pandemic and so forth, how this has given us an opportunity to stop. I mean, a forced opportunity for sure, to really ask the question, what's important? I wish I would have been stopped earlier, because when you swim in the pond of capitalism, where everything is go, 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 make money, go, work, succeed, all that's the water and the air you breathe all the time. And there's nothing wrong with it, except it can be too much. It can be excessive. So I wish earlier in my career I would have stopped and said, what is the place of work? Now, I had a big family at that time, and I needed to work and make money. I mean, I was making under $30,000. Within a few years, I was making double that. I was making $60,000. I went on up to $100,000 at times, but that was just a few rare years, probably around Y2K, 2000.
The building boom.
Yeah.
Everything was,
Yeah. And of course, I haven't mentioned another thing about entrepreneurship and having your own businesses, that I could easily bring my children into it. And not necessarily, I wasn't that strong like, I want you to be what I was, but yet I knew it would be good experience for them,
something that you could offer them as an opportunity.
So the boys started going with me, and they saw me handle people and work with people and relate to people, and so they saw all that, and I think that was good for them. And I'm a person who believes that every phase of your life is kind of almost preparation for the next phase. So I'm drifting now. What was the question? Where was I?
No, you were staying on.
Struggles, yeah,
That's
struggles.
Right. It was a good
you
drift.
were on topic. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, struggles. So what I was saying is, that's a question for everyone. How much do you want to work, or are there other things that you want to do? And I think once you are able to make, I mean, they say, like wanting is never over. You always want a little more money, that next job, that, you're always wondering, like, especially when you're working for yourself, is this going to end? Am I going to, I got to work now, the crops in the field type thing.
Right.
But in reality, all businesses face that, I think, whether they're institutional or great big corporations. They don't know necessarily what the future is. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I think I would have, looking back, I wish I would have put business more in the right perspective, not worry about it so much, be able to make a certain amount of money, and then realize that there's other things, give more time to family, more time to other interests, You know?
Right.
So I don't know if that's really hitting your. There's
I
a
think
lot of
that's-
struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's I mean, obviously, having been in business for so long, you can come to that conclusion after looking back and going, oh, maybe I should have put certain things in the
Yeah.
right slot,
But
you know?
Yeah, but that is, it's difficult to find that balance. You want to
Definitely.
provide for your family. You want to, be able to do these things, but at the same time, you can, especially when you own your own business, it's very easy to get so wrapped up that
You work 24/7,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's not healthy for anybody.
No, it's yeah. It is a good thing though to try to.
I feel like
it is a big struggle for a lot
That's
of
in
people.
the top 5 of struggles for everybody. I
Absolutely.
think that we've had in that chair is
Yeah.
time management and really appropriately creating boundaries for yourself and for your
Yeah.
clients.
If anybody
to know.
knows, if anybody's figured it out, let us know.
Yeah. If there's some magic that we have completely avoided, we would like to know about it because
would.
I feel like
Could help
we
a
all
lot
struggle
of
this
people.
way.
Yes.
Without being super rigid in your life and creating this
Yeah.
itinerary of things you do
Yeah.
every day. I can't,
that's no way to
outside
do
of
it
that, I
either.
don't know how to
Right.
do it. Is there any particular tool that helps you in running your business? You really don't have to utilize social media that much because of the nature of your business. It's word of mouth,
Right.
or the agencies or the
It's a
regulatory
necessary
systems
thing, right?
will give your name out. But is there something else that's been helpful running your business?
Well, this is an old thing that you hear people say, but the best advertisement is doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think that gets pushed in the back sometimes, like especially when you're running fast, you unconsciously begin to think that your image is going to solve all problems. But if you show up on time, you do a good job, you explain to the people, you listen to the owners, and what their concerns are, and you explain the process to them, and you have a fair price. And this is kind of back to that when I say price, that you asked me about struggles. That was really difficult for me. Remember,
Yeah.
I'm a helper. So
Yeah.
You would have done it all for free, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At first, I was focused strictly on the customer. So guess what? I wasn't charging enough.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Right.
So it took me quite a long time to realize that there were other places that I needed to help first. The first priority should have been my family, which means the price goes up, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole point is that you want to make a good living, okay, for your family. And so I struggle with that. I still struggle with pricing today. The market will hold a certain price.
Right.
Sure.
But
Fair
still,
market value. Yeah. Yeah.
but still, there's some fluctuation in there, and so after a few years, I got better at honoring my own self,
Right.
the skills that I have. I was underpricing myself,
Yeah.
getting a lot of jobs, sure.
Right.
And people will, they'll change designers over $25, $50,
Yeah.
So you always have that tug and pull on what your price is. But again, I got better at saying no. I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do a real professional, do it in a timely manner.
Right.
All that good stuff that people expect. And then, but still, I've got to hold this price.
Well, and as long as you're still, you're doing things in a timely manner, there's I know from what I do, a lot of times there's people that don't, things fall through the cracks. And of course we're humans and stuff happens, and that happens from time to time, but if you are doing things in a timely manner, you're respectful to your customers, you're professional, you're doing a good job, that makes you worth. There's so many people I know in my industry, and I'm sure in yours as well, because they're very similar, that don't do that. And, because this has to be done, you're going to pay me.
Yeah.
Right.
As long as you're treating your customers like people and with that respect, and you're giving them that respect, that makes you worth more money.
And I think that's a common theme that we've had with everybody sitting in that chair that has to charge a price for something.
Yeah.
They've all said and stated at one point, I wasn't charging enough.
Yeah.
I didn't value my work
Yeah.
enough, or I
Yeah.
didn't value myself and my time enough. And so I think we all kind of, me in my early days of photography, I didn't have the confidence yet in my
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah.
And so I was very
When you want to be,
I thought they were going to judge me if I was going to charge them a certain price. Like,
Yeah.
well, she's not good enough for that. And so there's
Yeah.
all this weird mind game stuff that you play with
Yeah.
yourself. But your time, your family, your skills,
Yeah,
you know. And
yeah.
granted, you don't start a job with all the skills, but once you
Once
do
you've been
acquire
doing it
those,
for a while, yeah,
you can up
you
your
know
price.
what you're doing.
You've been in this
Yeah.
job for 25 years now. Granted, there's probably, like you said, a certain scale that you can kind of stay on.
Right.
But now you can be on the higher end of that scale
Yeah.
because of your longevity and your years and
Experience. Yeah,
and
that-
all the knowledge you accumulate over 2.5 decades for a
That
job.
absolutely is worth money. You know, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to look at, okay, this person's been in business for this long. This person just started 6 months ago. I'm probably going to go with the seasoned veteran over here, even though that he might charge a little bit more. He's going to know exactly what
Yeah,
he's doing.
yeah.
And so, but then, granted, I know I look at things a little differently than some people, but
Right. It's like technology.
charging-
I never want the first piece of technology when it comes out brand new because I haven't had time to get all the bugs out.
Yeah.
and Bob, you've gotten all the bugs out mostly. What would you say is what's the best part of your job? Is it meeting all the people, traveling?
Well, going back to that personality, when you feel like that you've done a good job and you've made that part. Just think when you're building a house, okay? You've bought some property and it's amazing to me how young people even get started today when you think about the price of electricity, water, just a water meter, and then the building itself, then the wastewater. Have I left anything else out?
There's so much.
Yeah.
The foundation,
All
the
that.
framing,
Right,
and
Okay.
right.
So
Yeah.
now
plumbing.
it comes time for the wastewater. As a helper, you really want to make it simple and smooth and, easy and when you do a really good job and make that, you can just tell that, wow, they've had a lot of hassles in other areas. People didn't show up. They had to redo something. But then that area, it just goes really smooth. That's as good as it gets.
There's some satisfaction.
Yeah,
some
there's
pride
some real
that goes away from
satisfaction
that.
in
Yeah.
that of doing a good job, and you've paid it. You charged a good price because you did it on time. You got there, and you've taken in consideration all the related things that go with that. So that stands out to me.
That's the best part of your job.
Yeah.
What would you say is your least favorite part of the job?
Well, just remember those parties that we have. You have the homeowner, you have the installer, you have me, and then you have the regulator. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this goes also one of my failures is that if you're not careful and if you're going too fast, then you might start getting a bad attitude about these other parties, and and the one that's the biggest target is the regulator.
Yeah.
Then you begin to look at the regulator, which I was. Remember,
Yeah,
I was
you were.
I was the
You've
regulator
been
for a
there,
long time.
yeah.
I've been there
Yeah.
as the enemy.
Yeah.
And if that person is the
Right.
enemy, and everything would go smooth if it wasn't for them.
Right.
Okay, and so at one point in my career, I really made a bad decision. I was trying to help somebody who was having trouble with the regulator, and so make a long story short, I helped them win the battle, but I lost the war
Yeah.
because I made the regulator mad at
Yeah.
me.
And now you have to work with that regulator.
Yeah.
Again and again and
Yeah.
again.
So I was
Yeah.
at one point, like among the top designers in a certain area. And after that happened, which I thought I was doing a good job,
Right.
after that happened, I lost most of my business in that
Yeah.
area because I was kind of blackballed in that
Yeah.
area.
I can
I
absolutely
mean, politics
relate to
seeps
that.
into every
Yeah.
single aspect of life, does it
Yeah.
not?
Absolutely does. Yeah.
And when I say politics, the interdepartment type of politics that
Right.
go on with that sort of,
Yeah.
oh, you didn't scratch my back, well, I'm going to do this
Yeah.
to you,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
situation. And I can imagine that when you are dealing with regulatory agencies and the government and bureaucracy, you've got to tread
You
carefully.
do. You have to kind of walk on eggshells a little bit sometimes. But, you also have to remember that these people who are in this regulatory agency they're not the people that wrote the law.
They're just trying to uphold it.
They're trying to uphold. They're doing the same thing that we're doing. They're trying to feed their family.
Yeah.
you know. So you've got to just treat everybody. Make sure you're a person first. That's the thing to remember. It's just, be a person first.
Did that
and
experience
then everything else will follow.
Did that experience teach you to, in a way, stay in your lane in terms of, well, this is my job, and while I thought I was doing this extra helping bit, it really just created more problem for everyone? Or was it? Do you look back on that and go, I did the right thing, and yes, it had this result, but I would do it again?
It seemed like to me I was taking a narrower approach to my personality, helping this one person.
Right.
Remember that the best plan, it's almost like wisdom in a multitude of counselors. The best plan comes when there's clear communication between the homeowner, me, the installer, and the regulator. Mm-hmm. When we're all working together, we come forth with the best solution.
Right.
Well, not all the time, but in general.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, and most of the time. So if a monkey wrench is thrown in that, or if I get sideways with the owner or the installer or the regulator, then there's the possibility for disaster. But even then, looking back now, there was a silver lining. Even though I lost business in this one area, it forced me to go out into other areas that I would not have normally gone out into. And then later in my career, when a lot of competition started coming into my business, a lot of people getting qualified to do the job that I did, I already had this base further out, which really helped me.
So it ended up being a good thing in the long run.
It's one of those deals where when you're going through it, you're saying, this is the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. But that, just like when I was forced to make the jump into my own business, same thing. I was forced to do something different that I normally would never have naturally done, and in the end it worked out okay. So it really helped me. If I'm going to be a helper, I have to keep a broad approach to it. I want to help all those people involved.
Maybe be more of a mediator rather than taking
this
a
is my side.
Yeah, I know. And see, another characteristic of 2 on the Enneagram is we tend to think we know what other people need. And a lot of times, guess what? We do. We actually do know what they need. But they're not asking for advice.
Right.
And
you can't, That's hard sometimes, though. Yep.
Yeah. So you see something coming, and certainly you could bring that up, but in that particular case, looking back, if I would have said, yes, this lady does have a difficult problem, but then if I would have gone in and talked to the other parties and said, and with the attitude like, well, how can I help them?
Right.
Because they're in this too, then there would have been another different outcome than what happened, where I took it all on myself, very narrow focus. I'm right. This lady needs help. And I'm going to be the hero at the end. No, I wasn't the hero, and it really hurt my business. And I learned a big lesson.
You've had, you're probably one of the first people we've had on that's gotten this long of a history of experience in a particular industry and owned a business for this long. So, I really appreciate your perspective because it's been different than what other people have had to say, and I like that. And with all that in mind, what advice would you give to somebody who is younger, starting a business, or who's in the middle of running a business and been in it for a couple of years and they're struggling? You've got such a wealth of knowledge and history that I feel like your words are going to be super important.
Well, some of it's a summary of what we've already said.
Sure.
Remember earlier I said that if you haven't started the journey of learning about your personality,
know yourself,
your skills and your own things. I mean, and sometimes that's difficult to look at yourself. So you got to kind of maybe have a good friend or a good mentor. And that's another thing we hadn't talked about. I mentioned it at first. Even today, this month or really 2 months ago, there was a job up in, like an hour from here. Nobody would take the job. They went in and put in a store and then paved a little lot completely with concrete. And as sometimes we laugh about it in our industry, the very last person they call is the wastewater person. Okay, now we got
now we got to bust up all your concrete.
Yeah, and there was no place to put anything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No place. And guess what? The stormwater, all the water from that parking lot was draining onto the very little spot that they had for the wastewater.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like nobody would take the job.
Yeah, that was a pain, wasn't it?
Yeah, nobody. So, me being older, and I looked at it, I said, and really 3 times they said, we'll pay you whatever you want. That really helped. Like they kept saying 3 times, like, hey, whatever it takes,
we got to get this done.
We got to get this done. So the thing that has saved me, and we're still working on this, is that I had developed relationships and resources, people resources in my industry that I could go to with this. It wasn't something that I immediately, because what we had to do was prepare the natural soil and then bring in fill soil, which is called a mound system, which almost no one builds in these areas, area, because they're difficult to build because we get so much rain.
Yeah.
So I was able to talk to a variety of resources. So I'm getting back to your question, Sarah. So we know this, but we need to be reminded from the very get-go to develop professional resources. You don't know everything.
Yeah.
You don't. And you get into situations and you need somebody to talk to. The reason I got in trouble at one time was I was somewhat isolated. I wasn't communicating with a lot of people at that time. I felt like I was making the right decision. Well, again, if you have those resources, you can call them and say, hey, I've got this issue.
Right.
So that's one thing I would tell people from the very get-go.
Develop relationships.
Yeah, that's probably without saying, but develop relationships.
You'd be surprised at how not obvious that is.
Yeah.
So I think that's good advice.
A lot of people get isolated in their own little.
Or they're
world.
afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah, they're afraid to look like to look weak or to look uneducated in their field. I think it's going to reflect poorly on them. But today with social media like LinkedIn, that's an incredible resource. And what I do with PaynePoints. Yeah. I didn't think that was a thing, and Mike said, no, we need to get you an account. And since then there've been several situations where somebody's just messaged me and said, hey, what about this? And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I should try that. It can be a great resource. There's a lot of stuff out there these days.
Yeah. I think people not being able to admit that they're wrong or that they don't know, and then developing relationships with people who would fill those gaps for you, I think is good advice. And oftentimes we don't utilize that soon enough. So I think that's good to tell people from the get-go. Maybe this should be your first step.
Yeah.
What do you think the future holds for you and your business?
Well,
as you were kind of hitting those twilight years.
Yeah, my business is not the type of business that's easily sold to another person.
Sure.
Because it's a skill that I have. It's experience that I have.
Yeah.
It's not like I have a lot of assets, tractors and things that people would need. It's mostly experience. So even though I've looked at as I get older, and the good thing about my business is I can kind of slow down easily, by just not being as available. Because a lot of people, part of the conversation when someone calls me is, well, how fast can you do this? Well, I'm sorry, I can't do it this week. I can't do it next week. I'll be glad to do it the next week.
Right.
Well, they need it before then.
Right. So they're gonna call somebody else.
Yeah. So I can slow down, and I've enjoyed helping develop other designers in the area, younger people that are coming up. They call me, and we talk about things, So, I'm 67 now. I hope I'm having a little back trouble now. It comes in and out, and so I'm certainly not able to do the volume of work.
Right.
But I still enjoy it, and I get those bigger, more and higher paying jobs now
because of your experience.
Yeah, because of the experience, And we haven't talked about, the fact that, to the best of my ability, I've developed a good reputation.
Sure. Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Yeah,
to where
yeah.
people say, yeah, you need to get this guy to do it.
Yeah.
He's going to do it right. He's going to do it pretty quickly. The price is going to be right, so forth. So the future is that I'm going to do less and less.
Sure.
I really don't have the energy to take someone on and train,
Mentor,
keep the
yeah.
business going.
Yeah.
I do mentor people,
Yeah.
but like I say, it's really more
They have a business of their
Their-
own.
Yeah.
They're running your
own
mentoring.
business,
passing
Yeah.
the
Right.
baton on to
Right.
them.
Yeah.
So but I still enjoy the work. I actually enjoy the work more because there's not the pressure. I don't have to have the money because of the family.
Right. You don't have to get in so many jobs per,
Yeah.
period
Yeah,
of time.
right, to pay the bills.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually enjoy the work more.
Yeah.
Because I can spend more time on it. I think about it more,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know if I'm
You
answering.
can get that satisfaction that you did a good job, that you've done. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that
I get
totally
that,
answers
yeah.
it. I mean, obviously,
Absolutely,
you're
yeah.
one of our more mature guests
More
and have
seasoned.
been in business a lot longer. So obviously, the future and the direction of your business is going to be different. Yeah, I think that's great. I think we're about out of time today, as our sound director has told me. So I think that's going to wrap us up. But thank you, Bob, for
Yeah,
coming
thank
by
you very
and
much.
Enjoyed it.
imparting all of your years and years of wisdom on us. We thank everybody for listening. I want to hear everybody's response to today's story. So send us your story. We want to have you on. We want to talk to you. So you can find us on our website at PaynePoints.com, and you can find any of our social media link there and older episodes of our podcast. And I think that's going to wrap us up for today. So thanks for joining us.
Y'all have a good one.
Thank you.